Guys, welcome back. So today we are going to have the next tutorial on this series of ES6. So today this is going to be mostly set of interview questions that may be asked depending upon the topics that we have covered till now. So the first question that we have is this tricky loop. So we have this loop and we have functions. This is an array which holds the function array, and inside this loop we are just pushing the array with this function. Now what you need to figure out is what will be the output in this case. Now let's see the output. If you already know the output, you can skip this and go to the next section. Now if you see over here, the output is 555. Now the question is, I don't need the output as 555. First we have to understand why the output is 555. Because if you see over here, this I is a var type. The scope of this variable is in this function, right? So as this is function scope, right, by the time this loop finishes, the last value of I would be 5. Now as this is a function scope, the last value of I is 5, and this during this loop this gets pushed to this function, right? So now all these functions, when it gets executed here, the value of I will be 5, because I is a function scope, and under this function the value of I will always be 5. So that's the reason it prints the out 555. Now the question will be, how can I change it to output like 0, 1 and 2? Now this can be easily done using, if I just convert it into a let, it can be easily done, right? But that's not what the interviewer is asking you for. He will say, I don't want you to change the data type as var. I need to keep you the data type as var. Now some of you might say, okay, I put a variable var j equals to I because the I is here. It is inside the loop, so the scope will be inside the loop. No, the scope will be always into the function scope. So even if it gets executed, the last value of j will be 4. So hence it will not suffice our requirement. Now how to solve it? Now there is a concept known as immediately invoked functions. Okay. Now immediately invoked function creates a new scope for each iteration. Now let's see how we can achieve this. Now what I will do is I will create an immediately invoked function. This is an immediately invoked function, right? And there I will just pass value of I, and in this immediately invokes function I'll just do function j, and what I will do is here I will do funcs.push this j. Now as this is an immediately invoked function, so this function will hold the value of I, whatever I pass over here. Now let's see an example, right? That is how you can solve this problem. So this is one of the trickiest questions that gets asked in terms of var, let and const, which it is a common question. Okay, so now jumping on to the third question maybe. Okay, now this is my third question. Now in this question we have async closure. Basically this is a question related to the async for async closure. Okay, now we need to figure out what will be the output in this case. We have a set timeout inside a variable inside the loop, and we have a set timeout where I'm just printing out the log after 1000 millisecond, and there we have a let, and inside let we have j equals to j less than 3 times, and I'm just printing out the console.log let variable. Now what should be the output in this case? If you know the answer, you can skip this and go to the next section, but if you don't know, here is a trick for you. Okay, one hint is var and let behave differently in asynchronous code. Var is a function scope and let is a block scope. So let's go ahead and see the solution. Right now here, if you see, var and let behave differently in asynchronous code. Var is always a function scope, as I told, so all the set timeout callbacks will reference to the same I value. Okay, by the time they execute, I will be 3, right? But in case of let, right, it is a block scope, so each iteration of the loop will capture the correct value of j. Okay, now as it is a function scope, so what is the last value of I? Last value of I is 3, hence it will print 3, right? But here it will behave differently. So now what interviewer will do is he will give you this problem and he will ask you for the explanation. Once you tell the same thing, because of the function scope and set timeout, callbacks will reference to the same value of I, and that's the reason by the time they execute, I will be 3. Now once you answer this, the subsequent question will be, how can you fix it? Now this is how we can fix it. Now the question might be, why the set timeout doesn't invoke immediately? Now this is one of the trickiest questions that people might ask if the interviewer has some knowledge in JavaScript and set timeout, right? So now each set timeout schedules a callback, but none of these callbacks gets executed immediately, and they are placed in something known as task queue. Now the task queue will wait for the main thread to get completed, and then the task queue will call the set timeout function. Now once the set timeout function calls, by the time the set timeout callbacks are ready to run, after 1 second of delay, let's say, the loop has already finished and the variable I has been incremented to its final value, and that is 1. That is the reason you see when the loop completes and we try to execute, it prints out 3. But when you change the variable to let, what happens is, let is a block scope, right? Unlike var, which is function scope, let creates a new variable within the block scope of each iteration of the loop. This means that each iteration of the loop gets its own copy of the I variable, which is unique to that iteration. As a result, the value of I is preserved separately for each set timeout callback. Now this is important, because let is block scope, each iteration of the loop creates a new instance of I that is only accessible within that specific iteration. When set timeout schedules the callback function, it captures the iteration's value of I and holds on to that. This is important because I is a block scope. Now that means then when the set timeout callbacks are eventually executed, each callback will print the value of I as it was during that specific iteration. Now let's assume that the first iteration starts, I value 0 is declared within the block scope of the loop. Now set timeout is called and the callback function is scheduled to run after 1 second. What is the value of I that gets captured? I is 0. The loop continues to the next iteration. The second iteration starts, add a new let I equals to 1 is declared within the block scope. So set timeout is called again, and this time the callback captures is I equals to 1. The loop continues for the next iteration. And when the loop after 1 second, the first scheduled timeout callback executes and it prints let equals to 0. Now shortly after that, the second callback gets executed of set timeout and that prints 1, because each of the calls having their own copy of I, right? So that is why it happens. Now let's see the same example with const. Now const is in loop, const is running, const I equals to 0, I less than equals to 3, I plus plus. Now what happens in this case? Const declares a constant variable, so trying to reassigning it in a loop will throw an error. This example will result into a type error because I is reassigned in each iteration. So you cannot use const in a loop if you plan to reassign it. Instead use let if reassignment is required. So this is very basic example in terms of the const. Now next question is, what will be the output in this case? I have a block scope example function. If true, there is another function which returns inside the block, and then I console.log that function. What should be the output? Now the function declaration inside blocks like if statements behave differently in strict mode and non-strict mode. In strict mode, if you have not seen the video for strict mode, please go ahead and watch the video for strict mode. I know I'm not able to deliver it properly, but the concepts are very much important in that video. Please go ahead and check that. So in non-strict mode, the function foo is hoisted to the functional scope and can be accessed outside the block. But in strict mode, this will throw an error because foo is a block scope, right? So in non-strict mode, the output will be inside block, but in strict mode, you will get a reference error because foo is not defined. Now to avoid the confusion, use function expressions or explicitly use later const for block scope functions, right? So let's see how we can rewrite this. Okay. Now if true, what I will do is I'll just do const foo equals to function, right? And then I will return inside block. Now this is what I will do. This will still throw you a reference error if you see, because we changed it. Now if you see, it throws a reference error, foo is not defined. Okay, because I'm using const now. Because it is a blocks code, I started using const. Let me see the previous one, right? So if you see over here, inside block. Okay. Now this is another question where this is a closer question. I'll just give you a hint. I am using a for loop and then I am doing a set timeout. Inside that set timeout, I'm just doing a console.log and then I into 100, right? Now what will be the output in this case? Now unlike where, each iteration with let creates a new binding of I that we have seen in just a few minutes back, right? This means that when the set timeout callbacks execute, they'll reference to the correct value of I at that specific position, right? Now let's see what happens. Value of I equals to 0 after 0 seconds. Value of I is 1 after 1 second. Value of I is equals to 2 after 2 seconds. Value of I is equals to 3 after 3 seconds, and value of I equals to 4 after 4 seconds, right? Now you can assume what should be the output. If you're not, now if you see, value of I is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm just multiplying it with 1000, right? So these are all the tricky questions that I have thought about and I have gathered in terms of where, let and const. I hope you enjoyed it. Please go ahead, like, share and subscribe.